Welcome to the Our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Hello, welcome on behalf of Athabasca University and the Our World Heritage Sustainability Group. My name is Priscilla Campbell, and today I am joined with my colleagues from Athabasca University, Elder in Residence Maria Campbell, Shannon Inanlu Dayu, and Ivy Lalonde. I would first like to acknowledge that Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we are on and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous peoples of Canada, the Inuit, the Métis, and the First Nations. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. This session, Indigenous Perspectives on Sustainability and Cultural Heritage Conservation and Management, with a focus on World Heritage, is part of the activities of the sustainability theme of the Our World Heritage Initiative that is taking place in the month of June. As a center for ideas and people to come together to work with Indigenous knowledge, Athabasca University's Miskatchewan Center works towards inclusion of Indigenous knowledge and methodologies. We acknowledge the different worldviews of Indigenous, Autochthone, and non-Indigenous peoples and follow the laws of Waterton, the relationship between animate and inanimate, respecting the interrelationships of land, culture, language, and the environment. We acknowledge that we come from a community of diversity with diverse worldviews, but are working together to create a space for inclusion. And in this webinar, inclusion of Indigenous Autochthone perspectives in World Heritage discussions and dominant worldviews that has shaped the international approach to heritage management. We hope to bring Indigenous knowledge to front and center in discussions around sustainability and sustainable development, and as part of the established systems within the World Heritage context. For this purpose, we would like to draw on the knowledge of our elders, leaders, and traditional knowledge holders who come from different Indigenous communities in order to have a meaningful dialogue with international participants about the concept of sustainability from an Indigenous perspective. Just a few housekeeping rules. This session is being recorded and streamed on YouTube channel and will be available for viewing later. Attendees can use the question and answer to ask questions, the chat room. I encourage everyone to use the chat and introduce yourselves. Let us know from which part of the world you are joining us today and if you represent an Indigenous community. I would like to introduce our elder, Maria Campbell. Maria is an elder in residence at Athabasca University's Miskatchewan Center. A writer, playwright, filmmaker, and educator, Maria is one of Canada's most influential Aboriginal artists. Through works such as her autobiography Half-Breed and Flight, the first all-Aboriginal theatre production in Canada, she has played a seminal role in documenting the daily experiences and oral history of contemporary Aboriginal peoples, notably the Métis. Her daring and candid style has helped sensitize the Canadian public to many social issues relating to our Aboriginal communities. A dynamic lecturer, she continues to promote awareness and understanding between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples around the world.
Thank you, Sarah. And I would like to welcome all of you. Kirinaskum na bit of day boda. Katam skat na kakio. Nevats miuki sigawota. Ewan nanaskuman. Nepe miugawi akuma matswin. Kakio kiwao. Katam skat na. I want to just welcome all of you, and Priscilla gave me some ribbon and some tobacco and some sage, which is our protocol. And I'll burn the sage when we're finished. And I'll before I start, I just want to say that when we were chatting a few minutes ago, Jeanette and David were talking about there can be no sustainability without ceremony. And I think that that's something that we need to really think about, because I'm sure, as it is for everybody else, wherever you are, that and especially for those people who are Indigenous to the land, that this is something that you're all struggling with. For sure, in our part of the world, that the fear is not only the loss of land and environment, our culture, our languages, it's our children, our youth. All of those things are threatened. In our way, in the way that I follow, Waterton is what our worldview is, and that everything in that is interconnected. And if one is threatened, then everything is threatened. And certainly we've been feeling that in the last couple of weeks, in the finding of all of the unmarked graves in our territories, that our children especially have been threatened for a long time. And so I ask Creator to guide us in these discussions, and that we can our teachings teach us that our children are the very center of our world, and that everything is inherited by them. And so that we really think about that inheritance and what we're going to leave for them. In our community, it's not only the community I come from, it's not only that our land is being clear cut, but moss is being picked. The land is being stripped of moss, and it doesn't seem like that's a really big thing, but if there's no moss in the wetlands, then it means that the wetlands are going to dry up, and our water is under so much threat already. So I'm going to say the prayer because I'm feeling too emotional to say too much more. Aukio magati betsege hinken naskum miuk matson peawi here kanut. Witim nkawitsi here kaksnama wiakuma kweskais muhtea aski. Kawitsi here kan stuktama kapetawa wakuma gina kayas kapikskwate kuyaku. Witsi hinani kwitsim dan kaktimaki miak. Kweskaitas chigeak. Kakwen stutaki kukik. Atti peitsiki itsekai tehtaki. Kuesla poitte vekaita staak. Hangawi aski kistamina kenen askum. Iko kemio assekako. Kakitskaman. Iko kemio nakuhtsekein. Nistinaan vitsihenaan kakwen aspetata. Kakanwemi taak. Kasagi taak. Kueskais Amina nohkom notua tajukan kistamina kenen askum. Kistamina kuetsim. Kapewitap mia kumanis bisikau kawi mamopia. Kaksnamawia kawitsiria. Sukeimuwen kaya. Niotehewen ksewatsuwen katapanama. Pues kumames kanal kakwapsita. Joasim sinana kakwepiks kwestamawako. Haaminan mosumakani wapi kistawamina kenenaskum nao. Kwetsim nao. Iktautsan nakapi ekapektimagemia. Kapiwitsiria. Peksnamawia. Kahkioga miosiko takapesta eko mekamata kanto. Kanto. Basta ekminiogo. Kenenaskum nohtawi. Pektimagemnan benatohtaunan. Aigo kenenaskum. Heavyhead mercy.
I'd like to introduce Marilyn Petra to us today. Marilyn's sensibility to cross-cultural education, governance, and negotiation are informed by teachings in the area of Indigenous law in Cree, Inuit, Métis, and Dene communities, as well as her international work in Mindanao. Marilyn's work with community, leadership, students, and elders provides her with a strong foundation for working across the table on issues experienced in Indigenous communities and through governance in Canada today. She has worked with federal, provincial, municipal, and Indigenous levels of governance and has played a role in education for all parties in a number of areas. Marilyn served as the director of the Indigenous Law Center at the University of Saskatchewan, where she is an alumni of the Native Law Center program and the College of Law. She received her master's in law at Harvard Law School and earns Indigenous law knowledge from elders and on the land. She has created a number of community, college, and university programs for Indigenous people covering financial, legal, policy, and resource management. Michif and Irish-Scottish, born and raised in southern Saskatchewan, Marilyn comes to her work in this field with passion and conviction and focuses her lens on relationship development on the Indigenous forefront. And now I will hand it over to Marilyn.
Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you to Maria to start us off. To start us off in a way that we're reminded quite carefully that the children are in the center and that we have responsibilities and that we come to those responsibilities today with humility and passion and conviction. And really lucky that I get to work with Maria, to learn from her on a regular basis and to be reminded constantly about who those relatives are. And as we step into this dialogue today, I just want you to, I want everybody to just be comfortable, have your tea or your glass of water and relax. There's some helpers that are working with some of the elders and knowledge keepers with us today. We are looking at Indigenous perspectives on sustainability in cultural heritage conservation and management with a focus on World Heritage. So in the work that I've done with knowledge keepers and cultural advisors and elders in many communities, one of the things that we talk about always is natural law. What is natural law? And there's a teacher that I work with that says, you don't need to fear that we will lose our laws because the laws come from nature and nature keeps those laws and nature is capable of keeping those laws. And so that we learn in those ways. And so when I work with students, I talk to them about what does that mean? Who are the teachers outside your door? Who are the teachers on your path? Where's the water teachers? What's the sun teaching you? In British Columbia and Canada right now. So we're sort of sitting in the center of Canada in Saskatchewan, where we're sitting right now. And we know that to the west, British Columbia's got lots of fires right now. And of course, there are certain seed pods that don't explode without that, and that it's necessary. We also know how powerful fire is. And we can talk about water in the same way. And we can talk about all of those things as our relatives and how we work with them and what those relationships are. In Cree, one of the teachings that I've been offered is when you raise children, when you're raising, and when I talk about our babies, I mean of every species. How do you gently lift them up? Mio Pikinawasawin, how do you lift up the babies? And so today we're gifted to have 4 teachers with us to talk about their work. And I'm going to introduce each one individually, and they're going to respond to some questions that they've been provided with earlier. And I'm just going to tell you what the questions are. What does sustainability mean to you as an Indigenous person? In your Indigenous community, territory, nation, what is practiced or being done towards sustainability now? What has been your experience in terms of applying your Indigenous practices in a World Heritage context? So working with a heritage site, working on sustainability, working through those natural laws, working with cultural teachings. What stories would you like to share? Today, I'm going to start the discussion off with Martin Heavyhead. And it's a pleasure to get to meet Martin today. And I'm grateful to welcome you to the conversation to start us off. Martin Heavyhead is a member and elder of the Kainai Nation, or Blood Tribe of the Blackfoot Confederacy in Southern Alberta. He was born on the Blood Reserve and attended residential school. He completed a Bachelor of Science at the University of Lethbridge in 1983. He served as a society member with his wife in 1990 to 94. And of course, we've got society structures within each of the communities. He and his wife kept a thunder pipe from 1995 to 2005. Beaver bundle rights were transferred to him in 2002. Martin now serves as a grandfather for sacred societies on the Blood Reserve. He's been elected to the Blood Tribe Council in 1996 to 2000, 2016 to 2020, and then recently 2020 to 2024. Martin is a member of the Mukulkan Cultural and Heritage Society, responsible for repatriation of Blackfoot cultural and sacred objects. And he was in Azerbaijan when writing on stone, or Asinai P, pictured on stone in Blackfoot language, was designated as a World Heritage Site in 2019. Martin Heavyhead was involved in the nomination process for that for many years, and Asinai P is Canada's newest heritage site. Martin, thank you so much for coming on, and we'd love to hear some stories from you about your work and about the sustainability programs and about what you do and how you bring your practices to your work.
Okay, thank you very much, Marilyn, and thank you to the elder for the prayer. So we've been working with Mukakin Foundation has been working with writing on stone, Sine, for about the last 20 years, maybe a little longer now, but it's been a while. And I was a charter member of I'm a charter member of the Mukakin Society, or Mukakin Foundation. And over time, the elders that I worked with during that time have passed away. So I ended up going to Azerbaijan, not because of any great ability on my part, but the fact that I just outlasted everybody else, I think. So so I was there was going to be a whole party that went to Azerbaijan, but the Alberta government changed at the time, and they took away all the funding for this trip to Azerbaijan to accept the inscription. So I ended up going with Canada, Parks Canada. They were the ones that funded my trip to Azerbaijan, and it was a good trip. It wasn't it wasn't it was a very work focused kind of a trip. We did a few side things, found out that there's more petroglyphs in Baku, and we took a trip over there, and then we saw some mud volcanoes. And it was very interesting because it seems like, well, the Soviet Union had taken over Azerbaijan in the last years, and then it was quite repressed at the time, and the information that they let out was very you know, they had to give out official state information all the time. Couldn't just be from the locals. So when we went to see the petroglyphs, the local person who had gone and studied in other places knew a lot about. He didn't just know the state version of everything, but he talked a lot about what was the original version from their cultural perspective. So that was quite good to hear both sides, not just the state version, but also the. And then it seems like there is some left over from the Russian era or the Soviet era, where there's still some kind of suppression of this kind of information. So our experience in working with writing on stone as Jeanette is quite different. We were consulted as advisors right from the beginning, and eventually the bid to get the inscription started up, and we were involved right from the beginning. And we went through all the steps, and we're being told what was going on, and we met with the local people around writing on stone. And it's interesting to note that there's 13 families that are they call themselves squatters, and they came in and they set up ranches and farms around writing on stone, and they were quite protective of writing on stone, and saw it as being theirs, that it was their property, sort of thing. And then eventually some of the land was sold to Alberta, and they turned it into a park, and eventually it became a heritage site, a World Heritage Site. There was a lot of I suppose you could call it obstructionism by the locals, because they didn't know the history of reserves, where we had to get passes to be able to leave the reserve to go visit wherever, and our sacred sites were off limits to us for the most part. So from the late 1800s into the 40s, 50s, 60s, we weren't allowed to leave the reserve. We pretty well had to stay on reserve and couldn't go visit our sacred sites. But we knew about our sacred sites. Our elders talked about them, and I always knew about writing on stone, and always knew about writing on stone and how it was used, and I think a lot of people, if you speak Blackfoot, then you will know the story of how it was used and so on and so forth. So in the past, our people would go on horse raids to the south, and they would go to writing on stone. And at writing on stone, it's considered a very spiritual place. And in fact, people wouldn't sleep in the valley. They would sleep, they would camp before the valley, before the Milk River Valley, or after it. And they would only travel through there during the day. And it was there was a certain place where the petroglyphs would be constantly changing, and so they would look at that rock wall, and if the petroglyphs were good, it showed a good picture or whatever, then they would continue on, because it would be a good sign that the raid would be good. So this was mainly how it was used, and also the other thing that was used was for vision quests. So if somebody wanted to gain some kind of healing gift, then he would go there and fast for however long, and get a vision and use that for healing or for some reason. So these things, like myself, I'm a ceremonialist. I've learned how to sing the songs and to run ceremonies, but not a medicine man. I don't have anything to do with the supernatural. Everything that I deal with is in the natural world. So things like running ceremonies and praying, and we do face painting and that kind of stuff. So and I do drumming and singing as well. So while we were doing all of this, planning for the World Heritage Site inscription, they had asked us to do ceremonies like have a sweat and so on and so forth, and we did that kind of stuff during that time. And in terms of sustainability with the park, prior to it being declared a park, an Alberta provincial park, there was a lot of vandalism, and people came through and just scratched out some of the original petroglyphs. They added their own names and so on and so forth. Even had a famous artist by the name of Remington that I think he put his name on his signature on there, and then lots of other people. But there's a lot of graffiti in that area, and it's been quite a chore to remove some of that stuff and try to remove it in such a way that it still kind of looks natural. But of course, it doesn't really, Henry. It's really hard to do that. The other thing was they're talking about maybe adding adhesives to the wall so that it doesn't fall off, and things like that. And so that's the kind of thing, and they've been asking us, what can we do? The going out there and doing inscriptions or doing petroglyphs on the walls is a forgotten ceremony or art, if you will. So it's more or less just preserving what's there now. We know about the place. We know, what was done there, but we don't have the actual ceremonies of how to go ahead and do how to get the rites and how to do the petroglyphs and that. So
bringing an interesting perspective in terms of how do you, there's many levels to sustainability, isn't there? Right? Preservation, and then accessibility, and then do people have the training for that ceremony?
Yeah. And so, of course, and then also horse riding is not done anymore. So we buy vehicles. So
I've got a Subaru. I'll trade you.
But the other thing is that we've continued with our ceremonies, and those ceremonies we continue to do, and we still go to the museums and get our stuff like pipes.
Repatriation.
We repatriate them and we put them back into use, rather than making a museum where we take the stuff from one museum and put it in another museum. We put it back into use. So our bundles and our pipes would be kept sort of in a living museum, and they're put right back into use.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Martin. I just want to highlight some of the things, I think preservation of the areas come in mysterious ways, right? Some ranchers show up around there and they say, we've got to protect this. We've got a Waniscawin in Saskatchewan that was, a farmer also going, I'm not sure what's going on out there, but it seems really relevant. And so we get some archaeologists involved, and then we start to look at what this is. In Saskatchewan, when we look at treaty land entitlement, the selection of land when reserves were created, many of the nations here had selected Cypress Hills as their place that they wanted to go because of the sacredness of the land there. And so when you think about World Heritage sites, ancestors might pick different sites than other people, right? In terms of what those sites are. So I just want to thank you for talking about that. And to just remind us that the sacred sites were all over, once treaties were being introduced and First Nations people were being put on reserves, we start to lose access to traditional territories and traditional sites. And so I want to say thank you for reminding us of that and for reminding us about ceremony and who has them. The next speaker is Jeanette Armstrong, and I just want people to notice that there's a young man in the room with her. And it matters because we need to transfer these teachings on. We have people that we have succession planning in terms of what these practices are. And I'm sure Martin has worked with folks, Dr. Shane has worked with folks, and I've seen Isaac work with people in our communities too. So thank you, Martin, for your commentary, and we're going to come back to you. So if we remind you of something, you'll get a chance to talk about that, okay? Now I'd like to I introduce you to Jeanette Armstrong. And Jeanette is a spokesperson for Indigenous people's rights. She's an award-winning writer, activist, and novelist and poet, and has always sought to change deeply biased misconceptions related to Indigenous people, Aboriginal people. Jeanette Armstrong was born and raised on the Penticton Indian Reserve, one of 8 Shilk reserves or centers located in both Canada and the United States. She's a fluent speaker of the Shilk, she's going to correct me later, language, Nilsikchin, and is a knowledge keeper of plant medicine, Chilic tradition, and cultural protocols. She is a writer, a poet, a teacher, an artist, and is a strong voice in environmental ethics. Armstrong holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Victoria and a PhD from the University of Greifswald, Germany. She's also been granted an honorary doctorate from St. Thomas University in New Brunswick and the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Currently, she's working as an assistant professor of Indigenous Studies with the Irving K. Barber School of Arts and Science at UBC Okanagan. And in 2013, she was appointed a Canada Research Chair in the Okanagan Indigenous Philosophy to Research, document, categorize, and analyze Okanagan Chlik oral literature in Nshilshin. So Jeanette, when I heard you speak, it was the first year I was a professor, and you were telling poetry, you were reading your poetry to a group of students, and somebody asked you about translating. Do you translate it? Do you think of it first? How do you do it? And your answer, I've never forgotten, and I tell this story a lot. You said, I have poems I couldn't possibly write in English because you have no language for the things I need to say, like the breath that goes out of me comes from every being on the planet into me and back out, and we're breathing each other at the same time. And then you stopped yourself and said, yeah, I can't even explain it in English. You don't have a word for that. And I was so blown away by the lack of English. We never talk about the lack of English to truly talk about what's happening and what we're experiencing. And I just think that's absolutely related to what we're talking about today. And I just welcome you and can't wait to hear your stories.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to also acknowledge all the places and lands and territories you are all from, where you're speaking from and where you're listening from as well, and give you a greeting in my language. And just say, why haschalchal yayat, hipiat kikenia mi pleet nihuala, volqueltmentum nimstatistas dastatistar repleted. So I also just wanted to thank the organizers of this panel, this event, and really I would like to say I think it's really an important topic that we're thinking about here and discussing and sharing on here. I just wanted to thank the way that we're talking about it as well, to make an acknowledgement about asking knowledgeable people and these elders that are here. And in particular, I want to thank Marie, my dear friend, for asking me and inviting me to be part of this. And thank you, Marilyn, and also the other speakers, including my old friend Dave over there, that we've traveled to a number of different places. And thank Athabasca University and the president and people that are behind this. I don't know if I'm going to say your name right, but Shabharam, yeah. So thank you very much as well. What I wanted to really talk about in terms of my own experience and my own thinking about this idea of heritage and sustainability, I think comes from my life's work, and that's how I want to think about it. I was fortunate to be born into a family that lived up in the remote part of our community and our reservation. And my father and mother, neither of them were subjected to residential schooling. And so we learned all of the things in our language and all of the things out on the land. We went out on the land to harvest, and we continue to do that every year. All the time we continue to go out to do the ceremonies in those places. My mother is a medicine woman, and she holds a staff. In our tradition, we call that a dance house leader. She was a dance house leader, and so was my uncle. And my nephew behind me here, Nikalkuchin, Chad, he's taking care of ceremonies for my older brother, Richard. Jail. We're descendants of keepers of the Columbia River, Kettle Falls salmon chieftainship. So we're from the chief's hereditary line. And I just mention that because that ceremony has been continued for thousands of years, passed on to selected people that have the right mind and the right heart, and given permission through vision to look after that work. And so that's also part of our communities here is the in the structure of how we're to sustain our language and sustain our ceremonies and bring health to the land and to the people is through those ceremonies. And I really liked Dave's comment at the beginning saying that, there can be no heritage without the ceremonies and sustainability without the ceremonies. So one of the things that I think about and have worked on the last 40 years is trying to find a way to bring that knowledge back to our people because of the interference of not just residential schooling, but any kind of schooling in the public schools and any of the schooling that's really, heavily colonized in terms of, you can learn everything about ancient Mesopotamia, no curriculum, anything that I saw during the whole time I was through school, anything to do with the Okanagan, Syilx and Syilxchin speaking, or even the interior plateau people at all. Where I'm from, and our culture is vastly different than the coastal or the prairies or the north or the south. And so I think that idea of our of sites is I think an important thing in terms of places that are specially selected by the spirits, by the ancestors, to be able to transfer certain knowledges about healing and about things that we need to do to take care of the land. Those sites are incredibly important, as Martin just was talking about the site in terms of the vision questing that went with that and all of the practices that went with that. There are sites throughout our territory that have been desecrated, that have been damaged, that are, like one site, like the one he's talking about, there's a house built over it, and inside their basement wall is all of our paintings. And that was a vision quest site where the spirits not only spoke to the person who brought the vision, but continue to speak through their language of those pictographs. And those are not just, from 1,000 years ago. Those are living sites. And so, I think that we need to rethink how and help these governments and these organizations and world organizations to relook at what we mean. We can take it simply from the Western perspective that, these are old history sites, and they have no connection or no meaning, but those sites are powerful sites, and they're more than just to look at and preserve on a shelf. Like Martin was saying, they're living sites. We don't need to have them in a museum. We need to revitalize our language and our practices and our ceremonies, and our knowledge comes back through that. So I've spent a lot of years working at the Anauken Center, which is an Okanagan word meaning that there's a balance between the physical and the spiritual, and the balance between our mental, and emotional aspects of works that need to be part of the land and part of our people and part of the future. And so that's in our language, that's in our ceremonies, that's in our visual constructs, it's in the things that we're told in vision. These are the colors you need to work with. These are the symbols you need to work with. These are the tools you need to work with. These are the things you make, and you can bring that sound, or you can bring that song, or you can bring that work into the people. So all of those things, as I said, in the way that I think about it when we're looking at developing a better way of thinking about World Heritage, is that we as Indigenous peoples are part of that. They need to understand that they can't just do it from the outside and preserve it as if it were something to look at and gawk at. That's not what it is. And I think the clearer we come to that, the better our people will start to move in the direction of the health and wellness that we really need among us, that those sites and those ceremonies, those languages that go with that can happen. And I don't have much more to add at this point, but can add some more later. But so the work that I have been involved in, just from the, you know, I'm not working with a specific World Heritage site, although I think of the Anauken Center and I think of Spotted Lake, in our territory, which is one of the most sacred lakes here in North America, is part of our caretakership as Seal people. Many people from all across the continent come there to get healing and to get help there, to get spiritual help there continually. Our people chose to fight for 20 years to bring it back to their monitoring, their looking after, their caretakership, rather than put it in someone else's hands, because our people understand and know why it has to be looked after by us, what we have to do, the things we have to do to keep it alive and to keep it there. And so I think that's another important thing, is that one of our most sacred sites is, we fought, like I said, for many years to have Spotted Lake returned to us. We're doing the same thing through a number of different sites at Anauken Center, but there's not a lot of understanding about that in terms of how Indigenous people themselves have to be empowered with the tools and have to be empowered with the resources to do that for their sacred sites as World Heritage sites.
That is just just a beautiful reminder about the fact that these sites are alive and that it's not a property discussion. I think when we talk about this from a non-Indigenous perspective, we start to talk about this as property and land as opposed to relatives and spaces that are alive and organic, and that we have responsibilities and relationships to. I really appreciate you adding that. And also I like your language around, you know, bringing the colors, bringing the sounds, bringing the symbols, that those are not spectacles for entertainment. That's actual ceremony that has impact depending on what is brought to those different sites. You mentioned something else that I just would like to highlight for an international audience, and that's often you talked about, you know, your culture and language and practices and lifestyle and choices are much different where you're from than they are down the coast from you or in the interior, like for different places. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at Canada in particular and the United States also, and we talk about Native Americans and we talk about First Nations, Métis and Inuit, that there's a real misconception that there's 3 different groups in Canada and that there's one group in the United States, and that there isn't a full appreciation that there's multiple nations and multiple practices and multiple languages. So I just want to thank you for raising that to make people sensitive to that. So thank you. Thank you very much, Jeanette, for your additions to the conversation. So we'll just continue to go a little bit deeper, and we'll bring David Cochane in, Dr. Cochane. Dr. Kashane, Nigani Aki Inai. Close. Leading Earthman. Dr. Kashane is a respected elder and knowledge keeper of the Anishinaabe Nation who has devoted his life to environmental stewardship. From lighting the sacred fire at the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992 to sharing the stage with spiritual leaders, including the Dalai Lama, Kashane's leadership has had a global influence. In 2002, Dr. Kashane founded the Turtle Lodge International Center for Indigenous Education and Wellness. It's a sacred lodge recognized internationally by the Assembly of First Nations and the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs as one of the most important gathering places for Indigenous peoples in Canada. Dr. Kashane, I know you're going to have lots of stories and we could talk about many, many things with you, and you probably have your speaking notes set. It's interesting if we look at some international steps to look at water having its own personality and this slow recognition of the power of water. And I know you're a water ceremony keeper, but I'm just really interested to see what would you like to share today about sustainability and where culture plays a role in the work that you've been doing.
Thank you very much, Bojo. Anin, the Nemaganitok, Nigani Akin, Dishni Kas, Kinyo, Dotem, Saging, Donji, Nishna Bendao. I want to thank the grandmother for leading us into the discussion. We are living in unprecedented times. Humanity is suffering from the mindset of domination that originated from the idea that we could control and dominate nature. We need to come to terms with the way we are treating Mother Earth as a non-living entity. The land itself is the source of the solutions to the identity crisis and symptoms we are facing. The land can revive our individual identity. We start to feel the voice of the land. Of equal concern is the way we treat each other as different colors of people. Exclusion is still very much a part of our society that has led to anger and a lot of violence. We have yet to evolve to a level of being treated as brothers and sisters. In spite of all of this, we continue to accept any opportunities that give us voice to our concerns and the sharing of a knowledge left to us by our ancestors. Our strengths that we hold as a people are about how to live in having a sacred relationship with the earth. The world needs to hear the teachings we have to share as a people. Sustainability to me, as an Indigenous person, simply means respecting and honoring the natural laws of the earth. As human beings, we were given original instructions on how to live and behave as human beings. There is a spiritual law we follow called Ogichitipakonigewin, which means the great binding law. This law affirms that we are all connected, we are all related. The great binding law affirms each and every life form was given an identity with purpose and meaning. The great binding law affirms the earth is a living entity who holds a knowledge and intelligence. The foundation of our identity is based on spiritual laws represented by animals. The Anishinaabe people have evolved with the 7 sacred laws for many thousands of years. The ancestors of our nations left us a footprint and a path to follow. The foundation of that path has been the 7 sacred laws, which came to our ancestors through visions and dreams. As the first peoples, we've always been guided by our visions and dreams in the same way as other spiritual traditions around the world. 7 sacred laws represent the foundation of our identity as a people and can set a whole new foundation and a new narrative in this country and certainly around the world that is inclusive in respecting the diversity of the human family. This is all the more critical given that we are witnessing right now in terms of the recent horrific discovery of young children at residential schools across the country. As Anishinaabe people, we were given laws inclusive to all life that help us to be kind and to live in a good way on Mother Earth. They are 7 animals that represent the 7 sacred laws, beginning with the law of respect brought by the buffalo. The essence of respect is to give, just like the buffalo who gave its whole being for the life of the people. Love, brought by the eagle, is about loving the Creator and Mother Earth and loving ourselves the way we were created and loving each other. The eagle brings vision based on love. Courage, brought by the bear, is to live from the heart and to have the courage to be ourselves and to do the right thing for the sake of the children. The way a mother bear would die before seeing harm come to her cub. Honesty, brought by the Sabe or Bigfoot, is to be honest, to speak the truth from the heart. We are not to lie, to judge, or condemn others, rather speak well of others, honoring their uniqueness. Wisdom, brought by the beaver, is to show our gifts, is to use our gifts given to us by the Creator to build a peaceful world. Just like the beaver uses his gift of sharp teeth to build, if he doesn't use his gift, his teeth would grow long and he would die. If we do not use the unique individual gifts we have been given, we would not fulfill our true purpose on Mother Earth. Humility, brought by the wolf, is knowing we are all equal in the eyes of the Creator and showing gratitude for life received. Truth is represented by the turtle, who is one of the oldest animals, who has seen life evolve. To live truth is to walk all the 7 sacred laws together. We've arrived in a time when we need to build on values that support life. 2 common concerns can unite us as humanity: our love for our children and the issue of accelerated climate breakdown. These 7 sacred laws can act as the foundation for anything we create as we create a better world. Rediscovering our identity as unique members of the human family is fundamental. We all have gifts to share and an identity complete with original instructions on how to take care of each other in our home, Mother Earth. We have a healing and teaching lodge in Manitoba called the Turtle Lodge, where we are making efforts in what we call Indigenous knowledge and understanding. It is within our belief system that we are to live in balance and harmony with the earth. This requires living from the foundation of laws and values, having a spiritual relationship with the earth. We have developed a declaration guided by our elders entitled the Great Binding Law, plus the Grandmother's Declaration. There has been effort put into the teaching of the 2 local languages, the Anishinaabe and the Cree. We are also in the process of developing land-based education geared towards survival on the land. A major focus has been on supporting the youth in their rites of passage to adulthood. When we take the young boys at the age of 12 or 13 to the land for 4 days and nights to fast in prayer and ceremony, to be initiated by Mother Earth, and to ask the Spirit to bring them their vision and purpose in life. The young girls starting their own time are taken to the grandmothers, mothers and aunties who teach them about their sacred role as the life givers of our nations. We need to change the narrative in this country to a paradigm based on a foundation of values, spiritual and natural laws. True humanity is built on values that stem from the heart, being kind, humble, showing respect, loving all of creation. Mentorship by knowledge keepers can support the youth in knowing and feeling the land. Knowledge keepers can lead by creating earth-centered education approaches, including rites of passage and ancient approaches of connecting to the land. Learning to read the book of nature gives our youth the best chance of surviving following natural law. The land has an intelligence, a heart of kindness, and can provide direction in how to live in a sustainable and respectful way. There is no one panacea to solve all the problems. Nature operates on the principle of balance, working together with diverse approaches based on sacred values helps keeps the balance. Together, we can develop Earth stewardship initiatives, grounding scientific knowledge with a foundation of natural law. Indigenous knowledge keepers should lead the places of education that can be supported with proper investment. A national education campaign of Indigenous people sharing their knowledge of our relationship that has sustained us for tens of thousands of years should be supported. When we begin by reestablishing our relationship with the earth, we will find our way out of this world that is not sustainable. We will achieve justice and oneness, knowing we are all brothers and sisters and united by the heart. I just want to say in conclusion here, these spiritual laws that I brought forward are not laws that can be legislated. There's no legislation that has ever been made by man that can supersede the spiritual laws that the Creator has blessed us with as human beings. And there's been so much talk about legislating so many things when everything is already there on the land that shares the laws and the teachings of how we should live and behave as human beings. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cushane. I just want to really point out that we've got this model of sacred laws that come through natural law that we're supposed to fall in line with and learn from and be part of, and that's the basic work of what we do in community or can do. I want to acknowledge you sharing the 7 sacred laws and talking about the work that you do. Thank you so much. I also want to highlight something that you said quite quickly, but I want to just have the audience understand that when you talk about the grandmother teachings, in addition to the Great Binding Law, that there definitely is grandmother teachings and grandmother jurisdiction and grandmother roles, and that those all come into play together, and that those can't be separated. I want to really acknowledge that you said that. I love Read the Book of Nature. I think that's great. You know, that elder I was talking about earlier said, don't worry that humans aren't left with the laws, that we couldn't handle it. It's in nature, and that's where you go to get them. So just thank you so much for those teachings. And we'll move on to Isaac Murdoch, who's had the benefit of listening to some stories now. And I'm going to introduce Isaac. And I've asked Isaac to send me the correct pronunciation of his name, and I'm going to give it my best shot here. Isaac Murdoch, whose Ojibwe name is Manzinapkingego Anabe Boomjijik. He's going to say it for us when he comes on. And he's from the Fish Clan, is from Serpent River Nation, First Nation. Isaac grew up in the traditional setting of hunting, fishing, and trapping. Many of these years were spent learning from elders in the northern regions of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Isaac is well respected as a storyteller and traditional knowledge holder. For many years, Isaac has led various workshops and culture camps that focus on the transfer of knowledge to youth. Other areas of his expertise include traditional Ojibwe paint, imagery, symbolism, harvesting, medicine walks, ceremonial knowledge, and culture camps, Anishinaabe oral history, birch bark canoe making, birch bark scrolls, youth and elder workshops, and more. He has committed his life to the preservation of the Anishinaabe cultural practices, and he has spent years learning directly from the elders. So Isaac, welcome, and thank you for being patient as you round out this panel today. And you know, one of the things that I know about you is that you've come to a place in your life where you've said, I have to live this to in my personal life to actually be part of what I think is important, and that you've done what I think lots of people would call activism work all over the world, actually, and that you're finding voice through painting and finding voice through learning your own language and looking for those places. And so it'll be interesting to hear from you today about the teachings that you have personally and what that sustainability means to you in terms of working with the different clientele that you work with. So welcome, and you take it away.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I want to thank, of course, yourself and Maria for putting this on. And I just loved hearing the last speakers. And I love the introduction. It's not true. But thank you for saying all those great things about me. I just want to say that, you know, when listening to the other speakers, there was a common thread. There was a common kind of road that everybody was talking about. And it was really about spiritual sustainability, because then it applies to everything. Mazanapkan ge go na be Indigenous. Can it be go to be guys what and don't ba gnoji and do them and it's not be nini and dao. Nimki aj bekang nin dao. My name, Mazanapkan ge go na be. It actually means the man who paints the rocks, draws on the rocks. But I'm not just a man, I'm also an animal. That's the name. It's hard to translate, it's hard to figure it out. But a long time ago, people would grab their bundles that were made out of animal skins and they'd place them in the rocks. And they would go at nighttime. They would come alive and they'd go inside those rocks and they'd speak to people in there and they'd get medicine and bring it back out. That's part of what my name is, Naabe. That means a male animal. So I guess I'm a male animal, I guess. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Dave was saying too, which is really beautiful. You know, years ago, the old people would sit down and they'd, you know, tell stories about things. And they'd always say that we come from a Spingashmuk. We come from a place up in the stars. And that we come down here to Shkakamakwe, to the earth. And that on our way down, we enter through four sacred powers. And through those four sacred powers, we learn about about the great laws. And of course, the first power we go through is the power of fire. Shkode. Then as we go through Shkodeing, then we enter through that power of Nebe or Nabishing, which is the water. Then we go through that power of Nese winning, which is the power of air. And then as we enter through that sacred hoop of life and come here onto this sacred lodge on earth, we the last power that we learn is the power of Ke, the earth. And through that journey to this sacred lodge here on earth, we already come with much knowledge. And then sacred lodge here, there's lots of things here. In the sacred lodge, we have the Memegwesiwak, which is like a little person that lives in the rocks. We have the Pahisak, which is another type of little person that's gifted with arrows. We have the Bagojaniniwak, which is another type of little people, but they're like kids. We have the Benabe Kweak, the mermaids that live in the waters and have dens and rocks. We have the Chikinabeguk, the serpents that have an elaborate tunnel system that goes from lake to lake, and they cover all over the lands. There's the Nimki Beneshiwak, that of course that live on top of the sacred lodge. They have nests up there. And as we enter the sacred lodge, we're invited into a beautiful family, and that everything inside this lodge is our relative. And that as we walk through this lodge, you know, the walk is short, they say. And as we come in through that eastern door, you know, we leave out the western door and we go back to the Spinga Schmuck, up back into the stars where we come from. And I always think about those laws that we have here, about how we wear moccasins on our feet, so that, and we put flowers on them. We decorate them with mazaninan, with pictures. So it'll remind us that we have to walk in a good and kind way here in this lodge. And we're not the boss of this lodge. We're not the boss here. You know, but it's the grandmas that remind us of these laws. The animals are the leader of our government. The stars, the spirits, you know, the metegog, the trees, all of those things that's our government. And as this lodge, you know, we have to be respectful to everything. And everything gives everything to everything in this lodge. And it's such a beautiful way. The same way that a river just keeps giving life to everything it touches. That's how this lodge is too inside here. That's how it's supposed to be. And I always think about, you know, what the sacred sites that we belong to, you know, those are the homes of the Murdoch, of the spirits, where the pictures are. Giken Mananik. Gawin wika Minan Zino on. Kida Naknagewanin. We know that the original agreements have been broken. And we know that all over the earth, things are being harmed. Metegog, the trees. Gigoak, the fish. Wesiwag, the animals. You know, the gigoak, all of these things. And Chinachagasuag, Kinegego and Chinachagade, Mompi, our king. Everything on this earth is being compromised because people are not following the natural laws. Probably one of the most greatest laws that we have, they call it Binjagawan, which is the law of giving back. Indabagedna sema minwa zenbanan. You know, I offer my tobacco and ribbons. That simple act of offering something so simple and replacing what you're taking can save us. Because they say that when we give something back, it restores the balance. And of course, whenever, when we were younger, we used to go by these different places. What they used to call this place. There was a lot of pictographs there, written on those rocks. We'd always have to give something when we go by there. All the time we'd have to make offerings. When we used to travel in the forest, wherever we traveled by our canoes, different beings lived in different spots. And we had to always give something to them on the way there and on the way back. That was just our life, was always giving to these beings. And when we got old enough, they put us on those rocks where those beings live to go get educated. They'd leave us out there. I'd be crying. I don't know what I was crying for, just being a big chicken, I guess. I'd be crying because they leave us on where those pictures are. And they always said that they're alive, that they roam around at nighttime, they look for food. So I used to cry, I was scared. But they say that that's how we get educated, that the land is our biggest healthcare system. It's our biggest classroom. The land is where our government is, because that's where all the spirits are. And so I used to cry a lot of times, scared. And, I think sustainability, I had to Google that word because I was thinking, like, does it mean food? Does it mean like, I didn't know really what it meant. But I think now I kind of understand, and it means keeping everything intact for the next generation. And the way I see it, it's through like what all the speakers were saying, it's through our natural laws that we're going to achieve that. And that probably at this time in history, there's probably not a greater opportunity than right now than to really focus on what's really important, which is the land and waters, and connecting our children there. A lot has happened in my lifetime, and I'm not that old. I'm only 25. And a lot has happened in my 25 years. And so I think that, as parents, as grandparents, I'm a grandpa, that part of my responsibility is to make sure that the kids in my family, my village, know about these sacred places, know about the Masinapiganan, know about the tunnel systems, know about the fasting sites where all these beings live, to know how to make offerings to them, to know how to get educated in the forest, that they keep their language, and that they never ever surrender their hearts, to capitalism and all those things that are attacking our forests. Right now we're in a very sacred time. And I think that love and respect is the cure. I've often thought it was, when I was younger, I was like my dad when he was younger and my grandparents when they were younger. Just fight everything all the time. And that's how I was raised. I come from a family of warriors. All the way back to, the War of 1812 and beyond. All my family did was just fight, 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 fight. And they were good at it, and I was good at it. But now I think, if the problems of the world is greed and hate and just miserable people, then the cure is love and respect and giving and being happy and creating beautiful. Because our children deserve to have something beautiful. because look what's going to happen if we don't do this. We can all look ahead. We don't have to be seers, or we don't have to be, Gisquininiwak to be able to see ahead to know what's happening. So we need to create beautiful. And part of that beautiful is respecting the diversity of others and also celebrating their diversity. Because their songs and their dances is also ours. And that we're connected in such a profound way with everything that it's even hard to comprehend. Because with the water I drink, will soon be the water that Marilyn's great-great-great-grandchild drinks. And that water will become a family of squirrels. And then that water will become a thundercloud one day. And we're all connected like that. And so it makes sense to unite and not to divide, but to unite with the things that keeping our culture, our language, our customs alive, and respecting others. And that in the big spectrum of change, there can't be only one right way. There has to be many, because that's how a forest is. There's many ways in a forest. There's many ways on the land. And so, I think that's all I really know about that topic. But
That's a good start. Thank you. That's beautiful and connects directly to Dr. Cushane saying things like, we need a paradigm shift. We need this perspective to move to, Martin talking about whose vision is are we seeing this through? What's that perspective? And I'm very open to having either Dave or Martin or Jeanette, if a story's been woken up in you, if you want to add your voice to this, I would love to give you the opportunity to think about something that you maybe want to add to what you've said already, add another story. Jeanette, can I ask you if you have something you'd like to say?
I was just thinking about some of the things that were said by the elders that spoke before me and the young man that just spoke. I think one of the things that, just in the context of this conversation, there really needs to be more discussion related to that idea of spiritual heritage in terms of Indigenous people, and that connection to places, that connection to, through their practices at those places. And I don't think that has been done. I know that belief systems are different in terms of how, governments and the non-Indigenous peoples think about those things that, are outside of the human being. But I know that Indigenous peoples, one common thing is that we do know. I always say, I don't believe anything, I know. And as a person that has received, visions and those things that are needed to become, the kind of caretaker that I can be. And I'm not saying I'm anything special or anything like that, but those places and those spirits that reside there are needing that really at this time. I think the whole world needs that at this time. And they say in our tradition that there's a reason that the younger brother came to our shores and came here to find that teaching from our peoples. And I think that's really important when we were at the 1992 conference in Brazil on development and environment, one of the stories that I saw there was a story that was the exact same story in what we call our teaching stories that are handed down for thousands of years. The very same story that the BBC had just done, the Kogi people, and how, their story about the younger brother that that need those teachings because of what's happening with the spirits up in the mountains. And I think back then I was much younger. Dave was there, and like he said, he lit that fire, and we went there with Hannah Strong and Maurice Strong and the Wisdom Keepers group. And I heard a lot there, and I was lucky that I was young at the time, because I was able to look at that and come back home and see how important I think that it was for me to do the work that I've done since then, and really, really trying to work hard and making sure our language, our knowledge, and our spiritual practices are carried out. And they're not just something that's taught in a classroom, but that they are done, right? People go out and do them. People go out and fast, and we take care of them and give them the right guidance for that. So, but those places are needed because of that. So I wanted to add that, and I reinforce that. I think that's correct. What the young man was saying is that there's this theme that's emerging.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I just want, I hear the spiritual component all of you have talked about. It's not an add-on, it's not beside, it's not a weekly thing, it's the core. And I just really hear that in your stories as well. Elder Heavyhead, would you like to add any more comments to what you've heard or what you said earlier?
I don't have anything right now. It's just that with our Blackfoot beliefs, there's a division between the natural and the supernatural, and I choose to be a ceremonialist and to work within the bounds of the natural rather than going into the supernatural. In order to do that, there's a lot of sacrifice involved. And I guess I'm not willing to make that kind of a sacrifice to do that. So I'm happy with what I do. And there's been a revival since 1972 of our practices. The group that kept the bundles for about 23 years. And a lot of the elders that the grandfathers that worked with them had passed on. So there were very few elders or grandfathers in 1972. But since that time, the bundles have been transferred about 7 or 8 times, and a lot more people now have more knowledge and have the rights to teach and to learn more about our practices. So that's good, and we're glad that these things are going to continue and keep going. But I guess we also need to do more research because of the boundary between the U.S. and Canada. The Sweetgrass Hills to the south are in Montana, and there's been sort of a separation between Riding on Stone and the Sweetgrass Hills, but there is a big connection there, and that land all encompasses one site, but we've lost some of the ideas of both sides. So we need to do more research and get more of that information. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
you so much. It's true, you know, spiritual practices aren't something people go into lightly, right? That's something that, you're right, it's got sacrifice to it, and just the dedication of people like yourself to pick up ceremony and to learn even songs and sound around what this work entails is crucial. How about you, David? Do you have anything else that did we spark something else? Would you like to add some commentary? He's smiling. I think that means yes.
Thank you. You know, I was sitting here and reflecting on some of the sharing that's been going on, and the thing that came to my mind is something that I'm going to do. Is I'm going to make an appeal, an international, global appeal, you know, to have a international sunrise ceremony wherever people are in this part of in whatever part of the world that they're in. And it keeps in line with the sunrise ceremonies that we've always practiced as Indigenous people. You know, I've been into so many ceremonies, you know, listening to the elders, you know, as they've lifted their pipes to, you know, to seek guidance and direction for us. And to us as Anishinaabe people in this area, you know, we've always believed, you know, that the sun was the clearest symbol that we can see with our eyes that there was a creator. And what I'm hoping to do is to call that international global appeal for prayer, you know, to invoke the spirit of our ancestors to come within our presence, which our people have always done. You know, they never left the ancestors behind. They've always allowed the ancestors to guide us to, you know, back to the path of the creator. And I will be probably making that appeal in a few weeks out of a panel in South Africa, you know, a panel of people that come from the four corners of the world. And then I do have support already that, you know, that they're going to join on that sunrise wherever they may be, you know, because a lot of people don't realize, you know, the power of the act of prayer. And that prayer is really acknowledging, you know, the love of the creator, the love of the land, you know, and all of that. And what we want to do is we want to invoke, you know, the higher powers of the universe, you know, to join us in our efforts, because the creator gave us the gift of free will, and those powers cannot interfere unless we appeal to join us. It is us as the human beings that have to take the action to make the changes that are needed, you know, to help support the future of the children. And I've been told many times in the lodges, you know, at the end of the day, we have to question ourselves, you know, did we do it? Did this have any effect on our children? And if it didn't, then we're really wasting our time, because we're put here, you know, for a reason as adults, elders, parents. And that's one of the messages that came out where I've called for a special elders gathering in a few days. And that many people are sharing their dreams with me, you know, the spirit of those children that were found, you know, and then what the spirit of the children are saying, thank you for helping us, you know, to make our way back home. But they said, what is more important today and now, they said, was the children of today. Who is teaching them? Who is giving them the teachings, you know, for them to be given an opportunity to experience the land? You know, who is giving them the truth of their history as a people? Who is doing all of that? So what we were reminded of in the ceremonies that we've done so far, you know, the spirit of those children, you know, we're going to do a special ceremony to honor their return. But added to that, we're going to ask through the participation of the elders, how are we going to address this issue of education? Because it has to be totally revolutionized. We can't continue to assimilate our children, you know, and put our way of life secondary. I think we need to reverse everything and put our children's education as being our identity as the priority and what they should be taught. But we will put it on our website, you know, as you know, as the information we'll share it, you know, as we reach agreement with these other groups of people that are joining us in this effort.
great work and international, and we've got an audience here that can participate and support that. And just to add sort of Isaac's teachings of, just a small act can bring all that together. There's a couple of questions here, and I'll ask the first one, and you just let me know if you'd like to respond to it, whoever would like to respond. The question is, what do you think about declaring natural sacred sites as individuals with rights? So, I mentioned earlier that we're starting to see court cases that say that we will recognize a body of water as an entity that's a legal person. And of course, corporations have legal rights because they're deemed legal people, and they're starting to extend that to different things, different entities like water. What do you think about that? Do you have any feedback about talking about water like that, or maybe areas of land, valleys, things like that? Does anybody have any comments about that?
I'll speak maybe a little bit on it. I think it's I think that right now, because of the situation that everything is in, I don't think that we should rule out anything as if it's going to help. I think that realistically, when you go to a place where there's thunderbirds, they live there, and those thunderbirds are great beings. And there's a power there, and it's very hard to say make a law and declare them persons to protect them or to protect that site. I think that there's the great laws are self-managing myself, but at the same time, I also think that let's do whatever we can at this point to do it. To try and help. I just think that, in the big spectrum of things, there's so many different ideas and there's so many different wonderful, ideations that it does make sense to support everything if it's a good thing at this point, and at the same time, I think that we need to go to these places and the best way for me to protect these sacred sites in my home is to use them how they were intended to use them. So that's my first go-to thing, is to go there and use these sacred sites like how my ancestors did, how my dad did, how my grandparents did. That's my first thing, is to protect it by using it. And but at the same time, I wouldn't dismiss any other thing, because a lot of sacred sites are being destroyed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I hear you. So, and earlier you said, like, this is bigger than us and we're not really ruling the world. We think we are, but we really are not, right? We know that there is spiritual and natural law at play. And so, but do something. And if it feels meaningful to you to do that, then maybe that's the thing to do. Okay. Anybody else, Jeanette?
Yeah, I guess I want to just take it into a little bit of a different context, more related to your field, Marilyn. As you know, one of our sister nations here in BC went just recently through a court case trying to declare one of the mountains in their area, sacred mountain at Grizzly Bear Mountain. It was a really sacred site for the Tanaka people. And they brought it to a court, and we're trying to protect it that way. But of course, they didn't. I don't know where it's at in the courts right now, but I think at the first level they were denied. But I guess I think that is one of the questions that I think might change the discussion in terms of looking at it from World Heritage designations. in consultation directly with those Indigenous people, you know, who really need to protect those areas. So I think there's dialogue that, you know, has to happen there. And, you know, and I'm not saying not to go to courts, you know, to do that, but I think there's other avenues, as was pointed out by Isaac. And I think there are some sites that, you know, that just a quick mention that with Spotted Lake, we consulted medicine people in people with, you know, the supernatural side, as Martin calls it, and had you know, ceremonies and asked that question. And one of the things that they said, them spirits said in that ceremony, was that you have to bring your people back, you know, to understanding and using and being part of that site, and then it'll take care of itself. When you're not using it, they will leave. And so that's really an important issue, I think. And when you're not bringing your people back to it in the way that it was meant to be used by them, and that it was shown in the visions and in the teachings and the instructions, that, you know, that's the important aspect of it, that. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm not sure about your question and how to answer that in terms of human status. In our language, when we say tmihu, it's something that Isaac talked about earlier on, that we're animals, but that's an English language construct. What it really means is that we're part of that spirit of all those living things that emerge as birds or animals or whatever, and that we have power in that as well, on the supernatural side, that comes through in those spaces, in those places, and in those times, given the right, you know, the right heart and the right mind and so on. And so I think that's, you know, that I'm treading on ground I don't really want to talk about right now, but I think it's an important dialogue to have with certain people. As Dave was saying, it might be necessary to have that discussion among people that want, you know, that want to talk about that side of it in terms of heritage sites, right, and protection of those world sites like that.
Well, and I'll bring back your earlier comments. It could go in any direction, right? Are Indigenous people going to be involved in those kinds of legal decisions and new constructs, or are we going to use very governmental Western colonial perspective to create whatever that legal entity is? So I really appreciate that contact as well. Elder Heavyhead, I think you were going to talk earlier.
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to say is that I agree with the previous two speakers. You know, I do ceremony, and the ceremony is to help people, and we try to do the ceremony as well as we can. You know, to follow what we're supposed to follow and do what we're supposed to do. But very often people ask us to do other things that we didn't do before, like bless a house or bless a car, or, you know, something like that. And it's kind of hard to make up ceremony to do that kind of stuff. So I don't do it, because that's not part of what we do. So my I guess my understanding, I don't know, I say my understanding, but I don't really understand, is that I do stuff, I do the ceremony, and I know it helps people. I know it helps people. There's been miraculous cures for people that have come to ask for ceremony or whatever. So so we do the ceremony. I don't know how it works. I haven't asked anybody to analyze it and to break it down However, and I try not to do that. I just do, and I sing the songs. I go through the stuff that's supposed to be done, and I don't question it, and I don't try to analyze it, define it, do all of this other stuff. I just do it, and that's good, and it makes me feel good, and people obviously benefit from it, and I'm glad about that. And then this is what I teach younger people to do, is to do the ceremony, to do it right, to sing the songs properly, and so on and so forth. But when you start trying to analyze and define and all of this kind of stuff, then I guess for me it kind of loses its meaning. And so again, when you want to use these places, go to these places, then they should be used for what they're meant to be used for. Waterton Lakes National Park is also a historic site, a World Heritage site, and it has never been sort of a cultural historical site. But there was a fire there, and they found trails that are 10,000 years old. They found a buffalo jump that was 7,000 years old. They found a camp of 750 lodges. So there's a lot more cultural heritage in Waterton that hasn't been talked about a lot. So I guess, and right at the moment, they're building an interpretive center that's talking a lot about this kind of stuff. The Kootenai used to come through the mountains and camp close to the meadows around Waterton Lakes, and then they would send messengers out, and we would go over there and have race horses and so on, and have gatherings with them a long time ago. And we know of that heritage, and that was part of how Waterton Lakes was used. But anyway, that's about what I have to say.
Thank you very much. Dr. Cashane, I'm going to add a dimension to this. We're running out of time, and I'm going to add a comment from somebody else before you answer, okay? So in addition to sort of that adding this legal persona to different natural spaces, and I just want to read this commentary to all of you. Thank you for your gift of stories moving forward in light of history, hardships, power, politics, and injustice. How do two unique cultural, spiritual societies, streams, get meaningfully intertwined and brought into harmony and symbiosis, each retaining identity and building strength, while together finding a path forward that is optimistic, respectful, kind, and in pursuit of the health, happiness, and viability of the earth, our communities, and all beings. Complexity is high, the walls are tall, the fear is real. What are the most impactful first next steps we could take at this point? So we've had somebody say, can we create these natural legal personas? And now we've got a direct question saying, how do we do this together? What are some next steps? Somebody that's saying, I think I'm hearing Mr. Sinclair say, I want to take some action here. How do I do it? And I'll turn that over to you, Dave.
Thank you. First of all, let me comment on, this whole issue of how do we, give a legal context to the sacred site. And the first thought that came to my mind, came to me in my language. Manitou Gimi Nanishinabe Kenagego giving chai at me women of Madisivan. And what that means is the Creator gave us everything we needed in order to have a way of life. We don't need legislation. We don't need to be validated by another people that are just recently arrived on our homeland. We set the tone of the conduct, of our visitors and our relatives that have arrived on our homeland. So what that means is that we have to, commit ourselves to the leadership of our homeland, that we are the true leaders of our homeland. And I'm not talking political leadership. I'm talking about a moral, spiritual leadership, that will help the world understand a knowledge that we have carried and that's been handed to us by our ancestors, how to take care of the earth. And it's interesting, that I hear from many, many people from all walks of life. And that's one of the questions that's asked quite regularly. How can we, work together? Because what we're talking about here is the spirit of unity. There is no unity in this country. Even amongst our own, there is no unity because everything has become politicized, or they've tried to deal with these issues in a court, that don't have the foundation of the values that show any spirit of justice and respect. So we have to remain, firm in our commitment to the Creator's power and will, because the Creator has a plan for all of us. As much as we like to think that we're in control, we are not in control. And I think that our brothers and sisters that have arrived on our homeland, I would say, that they if they're willing to show a willingness to learn the rules of conduct on living on our homeland, then you need to see the elders and the knowledge keepers of our people, and they're right across the country. Is to make an effort and go and give them tobacco, talk to them. They will talk to you because they understand the power of tobacco. And the other thing is that, we have no choice but to become united if we're going to survive. We will never survive, what's happening in this world right now if we don't find a way to unite. And what will unite us is the spirit of those laws that I shared earlier. If there is no respect, if there's no love, there's no honesty, how are we ever going to achieve that level of the spirit of unity? What has happened, to many of our people, is that we become too accustomed to, to the context of the colonizer. We need to go to him to be validated in order for what we want to do. And I, for one, don't believe that. We don't need someone else to come and validate our way of life that has been handed to us by our ancestors. What our duty and responsibility is as a people that have been put in this part of the world is to share a knowledge that has taken us tens of thousands of years, and we've had to suffer, the worst that a human being can be inflicted with the abuse, to dehumanize us as a people. But we survived it. We survived it, yes, but not without a lot of, collateral damage that we still face in our communities today. And it is the visions become important, that we have to encourage the young people, to go out and in a humble way ask for a vision. And I'm saying to all young people, not only Indigenous people, but to all young people, if I had the power today, I would take all the young boys today that are 12 and 13, and I would take them on a vision quest. And I said, you're going to feel the land. You're going to humble yourself and ask for a vision and a dream, and you're going to ask how to treat the earth. And I guarantee there'll be change in this country, because the young people, will find a way to make those changes. The current generation does not want to change. They talk about climate change, but they don't want to change their lifestyle. Let me keep my lifestyle, but don't ask me to give up anything. I'll support, whatever has to be done in climate change. And that's been the problem, I think, with that Indigenous people are not being put in their rightful place of leadership. That's the first thing that has to be corrected, is that the Indigenous people, particularly the grandmothers that hold the deepness of the truth of understanding of the sacredness of life, our grandmothers. In our way here in this area, we could never become men until we're initiated by a woman. And it begins with our mother, and then, our grandmothers. And then finally, we have to go to the original Mother Earth, to seek that vision, to go back there and say, what is my duty? What is my responsibility here as a human being, here as a man or a woman, or however people identify themselves? That still goes back to that responsibility we all have to take care of each other and to take care of the land.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're getting thank yous in the chat as well. So it's been the fastest 2 hours I've had in a very long time. I'm gonna use this opportunity, having heard from all of you, to come back to where we started. And that was with Maria reminding us about the children and putting the children in the center. And you don't have children without mothers. You just don't have children without mothers. And so the role of women, the moving back into that kind of a discussion. And I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for just allowing me to be here to listen to the stories today. It doesn't matter where I've been in the world that I work with knowledge keepers. Gratitude is one of the most profound fundamental practices. And we start with thank yous, and you heard them all from every speaker today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It matters. I think we've heard about the spiritual integrity that was raised, and we've also been listening to this mentorship apprenticeship. And that's another thing that was very, very active in our traditional communities that we need to reinstate. The connectedness, the living and learning from nature and the land, what that natural and spiritual laws are. Do we need legislation? I live in a province in the middle of North America that's really over legislated, and I'm not sure everybody's lives are better from that. And so I think if you're going to make that as a step and you think it's valuable, we need to talk about what that value is. And just your own language, your own connectedness, and that the children are asking to come home. I think we've had in Canada, there's an ultimate shakeup from the earth, the core of the earth, from our children saying it's time to wake up now. And so with that, I want to give my biggest love to everyone for all of your stories today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Maria to wrap this up for us.
Thank you. I can ask how we go in you taxi. I want to thank all of you for your really beautiful, powerful words. And I just a few days ago was to a site where horse spirits live, and was telling the people that came with me, who are our lodge family, about my father telling me that when he was a little boy, they would be out on the land, kind of reenacting the old hunts from long ago, but would be out in maybe 10, 20 wagons, picking berries and just living off the land in the summer. And they would come to that one place and they would stop. It's a lake that nobody has ever been there except Indigenous people, because they've been to the lake, but they don't know where to go in the lake because it's got many islands. And arriving there and building rafts and going out into the lake to go to that island early in the morning and preparing food and a sweat lodge and ceremony. And when they were finished at the end of the day and were coming back across the lake, they would hear the horse spirits calling out when they were leaving. But that lake was full of carvings. Horses were carved, and little trees when they were small. And then as the trees grew, the horses grew. And I believe it was Martin who said that many of our ceremonies are like we'll never be able to. Well, I don't say never, because I believe in spirits too. And that if we're there, as I believe it was Isaac that said that we go back to those places and we do ceremony. It doesn't, we might never have the same ceremony. We don't know. But as David said, if we go there and we fast in those places, then that they'll give us what we need to be able to reclaim and reenact that ceremony. And David, I really like what you said about children and young people. And Martin talked about that too, that we every single thing we do, how important that is when we work with young people and pass that on and be able to, if there was a way, I agree with you, that be able to take all of our kids out on the land and be able to help them to do that. I had a young man fast one year. He was 13, and it was his first fast, and everybody was fasting. We probably had about 14 or 15 people on the hill. But when he came down, it was like he'd been reborn. He had so much energy and so much life. And to watch him grow from the time he was a little boy and now he's a man has been one of the most powerful gifts that I know I could have got as a grandmother doing ceremony. But I just want to thank you, and I really wish you, lots of strength in your work, because all of us work really hard, and we're always remembering that the most important thing is that our babies are always in the middle. And I think the greatest gift we can give those children that have called us and is to be able to promise the babies today that they won't be throwaway babies, that they won't, because that's what's happening to our babies today. And to be able to promise those children from the past that we'll protect those babies and give them what they couldn't have is, I think, the most powerful thing we can do. And that's a way that we sustain everything that we have that'll be given back to us, because responsibility is one of the most powerful teachings, I believe. We talk about rights, but rights anybody can take away from us. And we fight for them and waste our time when being responsible for everything around us, the land, our babies, everything. That power comes from those things. So I want to thank all of you. And it was so good to see all of you. I've never met Martin before, but I'll know him when I see him again. And Jeanette, I just love looking at your face. I remember when many, many years ago, 40 years ago, I think almost, when we first worked together, and that was so powerful. And Isaac, I just always love you. I believe that sometimes we're sent young people to teach us and lead us, and I believe that you do that in your work. And David, you're always my brother and my best friend, and I love you. So thank you. And however way that we pray or we talk to Creator or the mystery, that we do that in our minds, and I'll just be quiet and we'll do that for a few minutes. Ego kenanaskum dan, ipewitap niya nukum. Kanwem nan, wichihinan. Yumes kanal kamama upsita, kamama upmuhtea. Ay, notawi. Ay.
I just wanted to say some last words, and that's a big thank you to everybody who participated today. And we will be continuing this conversation on Saturday, July 10th at 1500 hours, Universal Time, with a new panel of speakers and knowledge keepers. And a big thank you to Marilyn for facilitating our discussion today. And I hope you'll all be able to join us on Saturday. Thank you.